Well, hello there. How's it going? Did you guys see the title of this video? Kiln unloading. I've been waiting all day to unload this thing. Wait for a few more people to join, then we'll crack it open. Okay, so if you have any questions, go ahead and shout them out. There are 20 plus glaze tests in this kiln. Cups, cosmic mugs, bowls, huge variety of stuff. I wanted to test out new colors because we're going through kind of a big change here. So I'm trying to bring back an old color palette. And I got new ashes, and the ashes change for like between firings, depending on the types of wood ashes I use for the glaze. So I just peeked open this morning because the pots were cool. They've been cool all day, but I was waiting till our calendar to launch this. That's on our fan club on Patreon. It's time. You guys want to open it up? Want to see? Let's do it. Fresh pots. So I've already seen this whole top row. Turned out pretty great. So I'll show you some of these as they come out. How long were the mugs in the kiln before now? You can watch the video where I loaded them. It was the previous live video. Okay, so every time I use different types of wood ashes, different things happen. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. And this is a perfect example of what describes like the color palettes I use. So see, this is called a Nuka glaze. I think it's a Japanese word. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but it's a type of glaze recipe where the main ingredient is wood ashes. Okay, so this pot, there's a lot of things we can tell from this pot. It fluxed, it's nice. You can see that this bubbling is not so nice. See the speckling here? I put iron, just a little bit of iron on the rim. It dripped really well. Made some crystal formation. And so nearly everything about this is exactly what I'm going for. It's a gloss, but it's a little bit semi-gloss. It's not like a high gloss. And the color is great. The crystal growth, again, that's really exciting. You don't get that in most glazes, but in a wood ash glaze like this, I've seen a lot more crystal growth in wood ash glazes. You like the bubbling? Well, it's good to hear, but I don't. I really don't like it, and I would never sell something like this. If it had a couple pieces, that's fine. Like a couple bubbles here and there, but on the entire surface, hundreds of them, just everywhere, nah, that's too much, too distracting. So I'll refire this particular pot, but if I want this glaze with no bubbling, I need to reformulate the recipe. But there's a lot that this can tell us. On the inside, the glaze is thinner. See how I can see more of the clay color down there? The glaze was not as thick, and there's no bubbling. So by thinning the glaze out, I don't get the bubbling, but I also changes the color. You see how there's like, every time you change one variable, other things happen. What causes the bubbling? My guess it's because the ashes have a lot of volatile ingredients that burn out. There's bubbling in almost every single glaze, but usually gases come out and then they melt over at a lower temperature. So one way to solve this without changing the recipe, which can be really confusing, is to just fire hotter or fire for longer. Now, the downside is it's going to change how the cosmic glaze looks, which is already dialed in. So I wouldn't be able to fire those pots along with it. So in order to stay with a variety of work in here, I'm actually going to try to change the recipe instead so I can keep the temperature and the firing the exact same. Yeah, they get really hot if there's coffee in them. Ceramic absorbs heat really quickly and holds it for a long time. So if you have 200 degree or 150 degree liquid, you put it in here and try to grab it, the outside of the cup's going to be 150 degrees. Get a handle. But these are great for like wine or just everyday regular cups. This particular cup I'll probably put in the kiln again to see what happens. I've seen both things happen. I've seen pots like this heal over, so all those bubbles would go away, and I've seen them increase in the bubbling. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but I'm going to keep testing. Where do I get the wood ash from? My neighbor, family friend who lives like 5 miles up the road and heats his home and workshop with a wood stove. Gives me the ashes. No, this is a band called UCIS, UCIS. So there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff going on. There's over 20 tests in this kiln. The color is spot on. The quality of dripping is spot on. The quality of where the glaze did melt is perfect. The bubbling is not. So I can't sell this one. I can't, it's not a finished one. It's not ready for market. And if I were to make a whole body of work like this, I would likely have a lot of problems. So that's the whole point of testing. Always test with small and medium pots in very low quantities. So there's about 20 pots in here, at least 20 that are tests. Yep, the type of ashes does affect the color, but I get a scrap ash. I get all different types. So I have a lot of random tests we're going to look at, and none of them are definitive. They're all just to see what's going to happen. Any other questions about the pottery process? Bubbling might look okay on the moon mugs. I'm not sure, though. These are going into the local blend, little coffee shop. And this is the overlap of actually 3 glazes. To get this color, it's actually 3 glazes required. These plates are nice because they're really simple shapes that, not too much going on, just some pinching. Thicker edges and rounded edges are more durable. Spiral in the clay and a spiral in the glaze, the 3 layers of glaze, to get a little bit of complexity, but also just kind of simple. And they're made to be stackable, because at the coffee shop they have stack like this high, so they're durable and they're stackable, and they can be pulled on and off really quickly because they use these in heavy rotation. In a pot like this in the local coffee shop will get fired, or it'll get washed in the dishwasher 3 to 5 times a day, 7 days a week for months, sometimes for years. Yeah, it's called the local blend. So I think I've got 8 or 9 of these that are going to them whenever they need a certain type of pot. The idea is that everything they serve their meals off of is all handmade pottery. They don't sell these at the local blend. They have a lot of cups and mugs there, though. They have cosmic mugs there, but no, they don't sell all the plates that people eat and drink off of anymore. It was just too hard to keep up. But if I make a surplus, I'll put them on the online store. This is more of a test firing, though. $22. I'm actually going to do 21 because I know for sure I'm going to refire this pot. I always count the pots from every firing. Any other questions? Cool, yeah, the local blend has cosmic mugs every day, and they're cheaper. It's kind of, the local economy is different than the global economy, so I try to give people who come to a spot to experience the art a discount. And the demand is a lot lower there. So this is the cosmic, that oil spot glaze, with the Nuka glaze on top of it. This is just 2 glazes, and I think it's 3 different layers of glaze. A lot of interesting things going on there, especially on the outside. I've heard that called hare's fur. Hare's fur is it's supposed to look kind of like rabbit's fur. I've heard it called that in books when you have this type of texture. If the plates go online, they'll be sent out through the newsletter, but probably not, at least not in the near future. I'd need to make enough of them, and we have to photograph. It's really hard to put a pot on the internet, let alone pack and ship it to somewhere like Puerto Rico. Hello. So no, cosmic mugs are online right now, and we're going to try to keep up on that. But if you want to eat a muffin off one of those plates, you can go to the local blend. So this is interesting. The inside, I mean, it shows the texture really well. Normally I like more variation and complexity in my glazes. This is okay, this is nice. You can see the black glaze one on first, and that's the white glaze on top. Where's the local blend? Just Google search. You'll find it. Local blend, Minnesota. It's the only coffee shop in the town where I live. I mean, if you look really closely, there's a lot of crystal growth going on. Those are yellow. It's kind of hard to see, but those are very yellow. And it melted perfectly. There's none of that bubbling, right? So the bubbling that was on this cup, I can completely solve it with one easy step. Put it on top of this black glaze. But of course it changes the color. That's called, I think it's called eutectics. It's a ceramic term for like if you change one thing, multiple other things change. You know, I want to solve for this bubbling, so I put it on top of a black glaze. Well, then it turns blue and hare's fur forms. I was glazing these 2 days ago. 2 days ago? Yesterday? I don't know, it kind of all blurs together. 2 days ago I was glazing them. The last video I did, I was loading the kiln. Yeah, this is nearly perfect. But it's over porcelain, which I don't use very often, so I'd have to use a lot more porcelain if I wanted to start to do more of this consistently. And I don't like how dark that is, but it tells me that a little bit lighter, I could get some nice color. These drips are the perfect size. See the clay right there? That was a carving in the clay. And the glaze, as it's moving, moves around that carving, so it dripped down from there. It's really interesting that the carving in the clay can sometimes speed it up and make it drip a bit more. I think I put on the green a bit dark or a bit heavier to make it drip more on purpose to accent those clay carvings. But there's a lot of interesting hare's fur texture. You might not be able to see it, but there's large cracks in the glaze. That's called crazing, and there's a line of bubbling. So in person, you can see a lot of going on. There's a texture here in the glaze. That is a little more flat. And then there, can you see the cracks? There's a crackle. They're wide. There's one there, and this is a line of bubbling. But all of it is smooth, so you could put this in a dishwasher. If it were a coffee mug, it'd be totally fine. Crazing can cause problems if it gets excessive. For the most part, it's just fine. And if it's on the inside of a coffee mug and there's a lot of crazing, it can stain over time. Most pots do stain over time. If it's like 50 or 100 years, you go to a museum and you see pots that are crazed texture that are 500 years old, dust over time will get in there. It'll make it black in the lines. But nearly every pot has crazing. It's just sometimes you don't see it because it turns black in the lines. So obviously on a darker color pot, you're not going to see that. Even on a pot like this, you probably would never see the crazing lines, maybe 500 years from now. But a white pot, you see them immediately when it comes out of the kiln. It's kind of like wearing a black shirt versus wearing a white shirt. If you wear a black shirt, you're not going to see the wrinkles as easily because the light is not reflecting off of those wrinkles. A white shirt, if it's wrinkly, you're going to see it because it causes shadows. It's a similar principle. I did do clear glaze over this one, and the way you can tell is because this is the raw clay. See the textures in there from the raw clay from my fingers when the clay was still soft, and it's glossy. And as soon as you get past this point, this is not glossy, this is dry. Gloss that has a sheen that reflects over the black, but this is very dry because it was sitting. I'll have to grind that off. Looks like some blue that was on the shelf. But this is all glossy, so I dipped the whole thing in a clear glaze. But I didn't do that with all of them. And this is dipped in a clear glaze, not super interesting. Two different types of green. The copper is kind of iridescent, and then the green underglaze is very dark green, almost kind of muddy, almost like a swamp green. But this has some iridescence. What's going on right there? It's kind of like an opal. Sometimes a little too dark though, and it bubbled a little bit. So I might take a bottle like this and dip it in the Nuka glaze, which is a white glaze, and try to lighten it up and get bigger drips. So I'll probably refire this one too. So let's go from 21 down to 20 pots. I try to only count the finished pottery that makes it to market, and I doubt this is going to be one of them. I'll probably refire this, try to make it a little more interesting. That's another way you can tell it was dipped in a clear glaze, because my finger was right there, dipping it down. What potters do I take inspiration from? A lot of them. Well, I was watching Deborah Schwarzkopf and Sunshine Cobb teach a workshop earlier, just photos of it. And I've been following their work for years. They're on Instagram, Deborah Schwarzkopf and Sunshine Cobb. So this is kind of amazing. There's another cup just next to it with a lot of similar things going on. But the bubbling's there. So again, these are not finished ones. I might have to refire these. I'll have to decide later though. There's a lot of interesting things going on that light blue. There's specks of yellow that are hard to see on camera. If you're having problems with the video, close it out and open it up again, because I've got crystal clear picture coming through. The bubbling, it happened down here. So it's the Nuka glaze that's causing the bubbling. There's a little bit happening on the clear there. And what I have done in the past, if there's not too much glaze on these and they're not too dark, I have dipped them in a clear glaze and it will stick a little bit to the outside, and then I'll refire them again. But when you refire things, everything tends to get darker. And if you do it more than like 3 times, you're starting to risk the pottery getting a little more brittle as it's fired over and over again. You have clear video coming through on your end? Yeah, so if you have problems, just close it out and open it up again. So there's a lot of cool things going on, but there's also, even when it's thin, this glaze looks very thin right there. I can see the clay coming through, and there's a bubble. And it's not sharp. This one might even be passable. There's maybe like, I don't know, 10, 15 bubbles, and they're all very soft. That's just a glaze quality that sometimes if you want to get really interesting, intricate, earthen glazes like this, you're going to need to accept some parts of the process. Let the pots be whatever they're going to be. And if they want to have some bubbling, that's going to be part of the clay, part of the glaze, just part of the pot forever. It's never going to change. There's none of it on the inside. Even if there were, it would be very easy to clean because they're soft. So this might be a keeper. I put a dot on it. I don't remember why, but I did something different on it because I put a dot on it. I think I dipped it in a clear glaze. But I could go back to the video since I filmed these. I could go back and check what I did in the video. Take a while though. There's a lot going on here, but the color's not quite as bright as I like. And the variation's a little strange. I like that. But it doesn't feel as cohesive as I like. It's hard to describe, but it's not quite what I'm going for. There's some really interesting things going on though. So, they're the start of something. But this one I pulled out earlier today, this is going to lead me to new places. And what's interesting about it is I normally try to get really interesting glazes by putting a lot of thick glaze on and getting it to drip. This is thinner. Everything is a bit thinner. I brushed the black glaze on. This is the black glaze underneath clear. And this is the black glaze underneath the Nuka. And it's just really kind of eerily thin. You know, that was my thumb. I remember doing that. And then this is brush. I brushed like that with a brush. But right there, it's really nice and thin and bright color, and the white is actually pretty interesting in person. There's a little bit of the hare's fur, there's a tiny little bit of crazing. It pools down at this line, and that natural variation and this kind of natural feeling variation, and little drips right there, that's all really interesting. And it's thin. All 3 glazes are very thin. So I might try to, I have it written down, the thickness of the Nuka glaze, but I don't have the thickness of the oil spot. Let me make a note. They call it the specific gravity, if you want to test the thickness of something. So I want to test the oil spot specific gravity of the thin. Sorry, making a note. Because this could lead me to a new color palette, the Nuka Cobalt color palette, to revisit it with a very bright color And I did some green here to see what that would do. And it's too thick. I don't like when it gets too dark, especially if this is going to be light. I want this to be light. But, you know, just brushing it on gives me a good variation of, okay, what's possible? Where it's a little thinner, just a little less intense. These colors, I think, could go nicely together in a different format of putting it on. So I'll have to think about this one for sure. Because the green's really interesting too. It has a lot of hare's fur and iridescence, and where it got thick, it bubbled. So where it's darker color, it's also bubbling a bit. So by thinning it out to get a nice thin color, I should also eliminate this bubbling. This is definitely a keeper, but when I want to make 50 of these, you need to solve for those problems, or else some of them will have way too much bubbling. Some of them will be way too dark. Which is always, when you test, always start with small cups. Usually I start with a little shot cup. Then I go to medium-sized cups. Then I'll go to like 20 of these. Then maybe 100. That's how you develop glazes. A lot of interesting stuff. There's some wacky tests in here. I'm sure we're going to pull stuff out that's ugly and just no good. But that's okay. This was about exploring combinations of what I have in my studio. Like a black mason stain. The black that I use on the moon mugs, here it is on raw clay with clear glaze over it. And what's the top? And here it is. Is that with clear glaze? I think it's on top of the Nuka. Yeah, it must be, because it feels thick. It's gotta be the Nuka. So on top of the Nuka, which is still clear, it didn't stay white. It blurred the black mason stain. Right here it's not blurry. Right there it is. It's funny, this one was just a random smattering of stuff, but look right there. There's a lot of color. This is all cobalt. This is iron, and this is copper. They're the three stains that I use. A glaze is like 10 materials. A stain is 2. It's a colorant, like cobalt or iron, and water. That's it. Just 2 materials, and I put them on top of glazes typically. So we've got cobalt stain, iron stain, Spanish iron, and copper stain in different thicknesses. You see cobalt really moves a lot. All of them move. All of them cause fluxing or movement. But they change. Where it's thicker, the iron is darker, and then it kind of bleeds out into nice golden streaks. Cool. The black is actually a stain too. Interesting. And this was a cosmic mug with no red, instead using a yellow and an orange. I don't like it as much. I like where it's bubbling, which is a downside, so I can sell this mug. I'd have to grind this down and sell it discounted. They're very tiny bubbles. Orange instead of red. I kind of like the red a little better. Even though blue and orange are complementary colors, I thought that's kind of why I did this. And the original picture I modeled this after, there's a certain nebula. Has a little more orange, but this, I don't know, what do you guys think of this? Do you like this better, or do you like red? Let's see if some light helps. Light sometimes helps, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. Yeah, I like the red better too. Oh, and this one already had a crack on the bottom. It's probably why I glazed this one, because it already has a tiny little crack right there. It's funny that people like red, like blue and red, because just look at how much in society, in brands, have blue and red. I mean, we're watching on Facebook right now. Facebook, Twitter, Walmart, Bank of America, red, white, and blue flag. Maybe that's why so many of us like blue and red. Or maybe, because we like it, that's why so many companies make those colors with all their logos. American Express, Visa. I mean, there's just so many companies in society that use these colors. Red, blue. Red, blue. Interesting. Yeah, so this dripped a little bit. But I should be able to file that down with the diamond bit and then polish it, and it'll be just fine. Yeah. But something about it. I like that better too. I don't like the orange as much. Is there a reason you couldn't use all three? It might look too busy. It might just not look very good. I did in the last firing, and it looked okay. It looked a little better. I liked it a little better than this one. It's very much like Halloween. Can you make a teacup with clay? Here you go, teacup. Put some tea in it. It's a cup. Drink from it. That is awesome. It's like a showering, like. Speaking of showering, I think it's going to start to rain. I can hear some thunder rumbling, and this is a tin roof, so it might get kind of loud. Do you hear that thunder? Thumb. Okay, so I'm going to show you the shelf after this. Part of this mug, or was it this cup? It was either the mug or the cup. Part of the glaze fell off. Notice how both the mug and the cup, they don't have anything along the bottom. But there's a spot of glaze on this shelf. And this is the first time I fired this shelf. I just bought this shelf. This is brand new. And there's a big glob of glaze. So I'll pull it out and I'll show you. But it fell off the cup somehow. And the reason I know that is because it's not sharp. It's round. And if it's sharp, it would be attached to the foot. Like, see how this glaze is moving? And it drips right there? Okay? It dripped. It was sitting on the shelf. And it didn't touch. But the shelf has some weird texture on it. Ooh. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, because this is a brand new shelf. I literally just picked this up a few days ago. And see how the shelf changes over time? The color changes because the pots were sitting there. This one right here, the pot actually dripped and stuck. And it's very sharp. Okay, see that sharpness? That will cut you. But over here, it's very round. There's no way it's going to cut me because it fell off the pot, one of those pots, and it's a little perfect bead of glaze. Is that interesting? Fortunately, these types of shelves, it doesn't hurt the shelves at all. I grind it right off. It takes 30 seconds. But it's important to know the properties. This, just fine. That one, same exact thing, like glaze on the shelf, but it's razor sharp. So you need to be very careful. Oh yeah. Nice little slight oval. It's not quite perfectly circular. There's a lot of different stains on this one, but look how colorful it is. Not too colorful, but really, like, if you look at photos of Mars, detailed photos of Mars, there are huge spots of ice and blue on the surface of the planet Mars. This is what we think of when we think of Mars, the red planet, but there's a lot that actually looks like this. There's Instagram photos of Mars that look amazing. I could do some coffee mugs like this for sure. So I use cobalt, iron, and a black stain. 3 different stains to get this effect. You can watch me do it in the last Facebook video. The wiping away. That might be the jewel. I might just keep this one. Sorry, this might not enter the world. I try to keep 1 or 2 pots per firing as the jewel, just one of the best that I put in a box, so hopefully have 20 or 30 years from now. This might be the one. cool. See the inside? They look very different depending on how the light hits them. It's kind of hard to show. Yep, this is the jewel. Setting it aside. There's 5 of these cups. That have a similar, I think it was the same 3 colorants used on these, but for whatever reason, that turned out better. You know, just the combination, the way I brushed, it's just something about it. Turned out a little better. Do you see why that one's the jewel and this one's not? Maybe not, but there's something about it where there's more texture, there was more of the blushing orange, which came from iron. And this one doesn't have as much. Everyone's gonna be a little bit different though. That's what I'm talking about with the iron. So if I add a little more iron next time, there's a lot of cobalt, the next time I'll use more iron. And the way they absorb into the clay and then I will try and wipe them off, all that has an effect on how they look. So these are very rough on the outside, so I'll sand all this down and then wash them before they're ready. So these are stoneware. I guess I might still call them lunar cups. Might have to come up with another name for them. No, I didn't forget to count. We're at 20, and then I still need to count that shelf. But I'm going to unload these ones first because I've already counted them. Yeah, I think I should use a little more iron next time on these. Those are 2 nice drips. Pretty predictable drips right there. Yeah, I think I need a little more iron. A little more of that red iron oxide to make the orange reds. A little less black, a little less blue, and a lot more red. That's an interesting drip. So we'll get these photographed. It takes us a little while to photograph. Who am I listening to? Paul Spring. This might be Holy Hive, actually. He's a singer of another band, too, and I put their CD on here. The insides of these are crazy. Let's see if this changes. It's gonna be hard to see, sorry. There's a lot of blue on the inside of these. It's kind of tough to see. Yeah, that's the link to the music. Thank you for that. This one's Dylan McFarling. He plays with those guys. So, this is a lot of cobalt. Maybe thin cobalt. Like, this is really what's going on. It's hard to see in this, but it's a little bit lighter there. And I know porcelain would probably be lighter too. So more iron next time to make more deeper reds. That one's also porcelain and these are stoneware. That's a porcelain with grog in it. And these are stoneware. That's another reason the color isn't as bright on these, because these are stoneware. So I might have to go back to porcelain. Yeah. Like this one. Yeah, this one's porcelain as well. It's porcelain with grog in it. And the iron is a lot brighter. The blue is more blue as opposed to black. So I think I gotta go back to porcelain. Big old bowl. That's all black stain. And that's cobalt stain and iron stain. Spiral inside, and you can see those ripples right there from my fingers impressing into the clay, just each finger. Showing through underneath the glaze. Inside glazes. Nailed it. 36 so far. 36 pots in this firing. Any questions? Yeah, I gotta do more moon mugs with all that going on. Could use a lot more of them. So there's this glaze palette called Nuka Cobalt. I'm trying to figure out the newest version of it. I don't know how I feel about the crazing though. Crazing's probably fine. I was drinking out of some cups last night at a friend's house from this potter named Richard Bresnahan, and the cups are probably 20 years old. We had some wine out of them, these little wine cups, and they had cracks in them that look just like this, crazing lines. You might not even be able to see it, can't feel it, but right there, there's one. Right here, you might be able to see that one a little better. Right there, it's called crazing, very subtle. And even in that wine cup that's over 20 years old, it looked identical. Can I talk about the geography of the clay? Sure, this is a stoneware clay. It's actually called a clay body because it's a bunch of different clays mixed together. So a stoneware clay body, the reason you mix them together is because one of them might be really nice on the pottery wheel, but when you fire it, it turns to sludge. It turns to a puddle. It'll melt. Another one might hold up really well if you fire it, but when you make a pot with it, it just doesn't stretch. Or it might stretch, but when it dries, it just cracks all over the place. So you need to add sand, a little bit of sand so it stops cracking, and you need to add a little bit of kaolin so it doesn't turn into a puddle in the kiln, or you need to add a little bit of ball clay so it throws better. So you mix all these clays together in different percentages, and that makes a stoneware or porcelain or an earthenware clay body. A body of different clays mixed together. And you see little black spots in there. There's only a clear glaze on the inside here, so it's soft. It's kind of a semi-gloss. But do I have any experiments in this kiln firing? Over 20. So we'll get to them. See this little black spots there? It's called speckling. They're called iron spots. And you have to look closely, but they're all over. They're all over. And this clay body has very few iron spots compared to its kind of sister version. It's a tableware. This is a tableware, no oxide. So in the oxide one, they take a scoop of iron oxide and just dump it in. Same iron that causes this color on the rim. And they dump it in the clay and it mixes throughout and you get more iron spotting. Because some potters really like that. It makes it really dramatic, kind of like bigger spots in different places. But naturally in clays there are things like iron, there are things like cobalt that are in the clay in small amounts. Because clay just comes out of the ground. So especially when you mix 10 different clays together, you're going to get all kinds of crazy, wild things coming out that you probably would never see when you're eating at, just name the restaurant. Any big chain restaurant, Chili's or Olive Garden or whatever, that white porcelain you're eating off of, they get it as pure and clean as they can. Because it's not art. It's just a plate. But if you're doing art, you can let the material speak. And the material has a lot to say. You actually see my fingerprints right there. Maybe not in the camera. But if you have a pot, turn it over and look very closely on these marks, because my fingerprint is actually there. So I'm getting closer to bringing back this glaze color palette, but I'm not a huge fan of how the green looks right now, and it's still a little dark for me. So this is definitely a keeper, but I need to tweak the colors more before I'm able to do big batches. But look at this iridescence. That's really nice. Little dark, that's okay. Little uneven here. It's not white, so I'll need to tweak it a little bit. Let's move this one first. I might need to keep this one too. just because I'm positive that I made this cup when I was blindfolded, because I made a certain style of cup out of porcelain. If you search blindfolded pottery, hopefully on Facebook if their search engine's good enough, otherwise I'm positive it'll show up on Google, on YouTube, blindfolded pottery. I made some cups out of porcelain, and this is one of them. It's a little too heavy. It's the shape that I made, and it's porcelain, not stoneware. Most of my pots are stoneware. Nuka glaze iron just dipped simply in a clear glaze. Lots of crazing, but really interesting crazing. And what's most interesting for me is the quality of this color. Really like that. I don't like the crazing as much, but you probably can't even see it right there. It's very subtle, but it was crackling. It's a crackle glaze. But yeah, that's really interesting. Just the quality of yellow. So I might keep this cup too, just because 20 years from now it'd be cool to look back at that YouTube video of making this cup with a blindfold on. That's just kind of cool. And it turned out really nice. I wish you could see the subtle crazing on there. Let's try and focus the camera on it. Let's try again. Maybe I need a macro lens or something. Not sure if you can see, but there's just crackle all over. They look different in person. There's way more complexity. Pretty cool. Any other questions? This one dripped. Why didn't that one bubble? Because I dipped it in a clear glaze, but it also caused the crazing and it turned from white to clear. It looks white, but that's because it's porcelain. The other one bubbled because there's no clear glaze on it. So this one dripped, but I can tell it wasn't really the glaze. It was a little bit of combination of the glaze, but it was mostly cobalt. And cobalt's just a skim surface on there, so I'll take the Dremel. It's very thin. That's the thickest part. It'll come off and you won't even be able to tell that you might see a little remnants of where it looks like it dripped, but it'll be perfectly smooth and hard to notice unless you're really looking for it. So yeah, this is definitely a keeper. Just takes a little more work to get it to that point. That's why I never do like kiln unloadings for sale, because there's a lot of work that's left before they're ready. Where did I learn to throw the double-lipped bowl? I learned through just a lot of practice and watching videos of Warren McKenzie on YouTube. He makes a double-lipped bowl, or a folded over lip that's much bigger, and I watched him, and then I just practiced what might be my own version of it. Ever dropped things while moving it? All the time. I dropped a pot in the last video. But I try not to. Okay, so this is stoneware. A lot of different thicknesses of iron on top of Nuka with clear glaze on top of that. The inside doesn't have any of the Nuka glaze, and it's very dark, but static. Those drips don't move very much. On the outside, it's not static at all. There's a lot of horizontal movement because there's two glazes in a stain here. There's one glaze and one stain there. So that's very static, and this is very iridescent. There's also a lot of crazing and crackling. It's not quite gold. Not sure how I feel about these colors. Kind of like it. Whoa. So that dripped, but barely at all. So I'll be able to fix that no problem. Even though right now it's razor sharp. It's really interesting in person. It doesn't look the same right now, but I'm going to shine some light on it, try to make it look a little better. No, it's not working. Oh, it's not working. I'll have to practice that some other time. But but it's really a lot going on right down there. Oh, it's because I put a little bit of cobalt. Normally I don't mix the copper and cobalt on a single pot, but I did on this one. Whoa. It's real trippy. It's green, but there's a streak of blue in there. I'm gonna try again just because it's so cool. Nah, it's partly the angle you're seeing it at. Yeah, you're not gonna be able to see it. Yeah, I don't know. Too tough. It's good though. It's real nice. Very nice. Oh, I just put that one back. Why did I put that back? Might just try firing some of these hotter. Or maybe if I lower the flux or something, because the color is perfect. This is exactly the type of color I'm going for. Not the blue. The blue's a little bit accidental. It's from my fingers. But the bubbling is still there. If you look closely, I don't want that. I do want this though. These lines and how it breaks over these lines, and how the iron looks on top of it. That is very nice. So, got some work to do on this glaze. Got to tweak the recipe a little bit. That's nice too. Just 3 fingers. This one I put iron on. It almost disappeared. See, there's a yellow streak. It's gonna be hard to see. Right here. Slightly yellow right there. Can you see that? Right here. Slightly yellow. You see it? Almost looks like there's a highlighter on it. It's because I put iron. I never put iron on these, but I did on this one to see what would happen. There's a more drastic one on the inside. There's a few of them, but it's very thick, which is interesting because if I did it with cobalt, you would definitely see it. Looks green, so you can see a slightly different color change there. I have to adjust this light. Bunch of bowls. Probably gonna have to do a bowl sale soon. It looked good. We got a bowl sale coming up. I think it's time. Yeah, that looks great. These bowls are made to be mostly stackable. Mostly stackable. And because the whole cosmic color palette is so dark, I've been trying to come up with another color palette that's lighter. But that's still a little too dark. So I want to do a light blue color palette to have a darker blue color palette and have both to complement each other. Do I sand the sharp edges? I spend a huge, hours and hours, significant amount of time polishing the sharp edges. It's not, sanding is not really the right term for it, because if you just use sandpaper and sand things, you're gonna scratch the glaze. So you need to be very careful about how you polish things. And it does scratch the glaze a little bit, but that's the process of changing it from sharp to smooth. A lot of red on the inside of that one. It melted perfectly. Sometimes the red, if it gets too thick on a lot of variation like that, it'll get bubbly, but that one's perfect. Where the cobalt gets thicker, sometimes it turns blue like this, like here. Sometimes it turns yellowish. See that? Sometimes it's a deep blue, pooling blue. Sometimes it's yellowish brown and gold. Those are the exact same materials, making drastically different colors. So this pot was cracked when it was cracked before I fired it. Oh, that's alright, I might have to test that. Huge crack, so I painted over the crack, but cracks get bigger in every firing. But it didn't go all the way through. I might still test it with water to make sure the glaze covered it. But it looks like everything else about it turned out perfectly. So I'll still sell this one, but it'll be discounted because everything else turned out great. But yeah, it's got a crack in the clay. Two little test cups. This is a great example of why I don't use too much red ever. See that? It's a bubble. And if I tap it, it breaks open. Right? You can't have that. You can't have that on something you're going to eat and drink from. Which is why I don't use a whole lot of red. I'm very careful when I do use it, and it takes a long time to put on. Red, to get it drippy, bright reds is really tough in ceramics. It's pretty interesting. All these little tiny lines, these tiny little drips. That's just happening naturally. As the kiln's melting, things are sticking together. As the temperature goes up, even the kiln furniture, sometimes it will stick. Something you have to be careful of. Check that out. You know, I said things stick. The post from underneath stuck, and I barely just pulled it off. So that could have fallen and broken a pot right there. So you gotta be very careful with unloading the kiln. More careful than I'm being. $62 so far. Any questions? Maybe I should just do more of this. It's light, it's interesting, a lot of drips, just brushing all over the place. I just don't like doing it all over the whole pot because it's really dark. I mean, I like it. The shelves are not metal. Metal usually melts. They're a type of silicon carbide. I want to get this effect, but for the whole pot to feel lighter. Maybe this is a way to do it. This was a test though, but everything about it is interesting. Not so interesting. These 3 spots were 3 different types of colorants. It's like cobalt, black, and iron. And I dipped the whole thing in a clear glaze. They look almost identical. And that's copper. Not very interesting. But that's part of testing. You just need to test things to see how they turn out. Sometimes they're just not very interesting. Even the rim, I did 3 different things, just didn't turn out. What I might do is take this whole thing and dip it in a Nuka glaze, because that's a creamier white. And these are colorants. Sometimes colorants, when there's not enough glaze chemicals, they look kind of boring. But if I dip it in a white glaze, it might be a little more interesting. So put it right back on the shelf. So I got to go thinner on the copper, but there's a lot of potential here. A lot of potential. It's like a little bit of cobalt. But that bubbling, I got to get rid of that. So this one I'll probably even refire too, because I don't want that bubbling. But I do want that. So there's a lot of potential. I'm not sure, this line's a little too thick too. Not super psyched about it. But I am psyched about the color here. If I can get it a little bit lighter. But these pots will be around in my studio for a while I kind of think about the next batch of glaze. Oh, this was green and blue. The green is way too dark. The blue is trippy though. That's an intense blue. Way too dark, way darker than what I thought. That's kind of interesting where they overlap. Obviously it's hard to control the thickness if you watched how I brushed it on. But that transition there, whew, that's kind of interesting. The intensity of that is really interesting. And then these 2 different types of blue by each other. It's kind of interesting. So maybe there's something here. I have to think about it some more. These 2 different types of blue. This is a store-bought underglaze blue, and this is a blue ash glaze. But together, maybe there's something there. It's really intense though. It's not very earthen. Look at the overlap though. There's an overlap where it gets really bright. Right there. Some of the pots I'm putting over there because I want to experiment with more. Maybe I should just do more of this. It's simple, it melted, there's some shimmer, some hare's fur. Simple, it's light. It could be lighter. That's still a little dark. Could be lighter. I dipped the whole thing in a Nuka glaze. See, I don't write down all my tests. If you're testing glazes, write it down. Write down as much as you can. But the reason I don't write down all my tests is because I've used only a very specific number of glazes. It's like 2 glazes. 3 glazes. The clear glaze, the Nuka glaze, and the cosmic oil spot one. I'm just using combinations of those, and if I do anything else, it's like green stain or something obvious, like like cobalt. That has cobalt on the rim. It's just obvious that that's cobalt. It's so crazy intense. So this, I mean, I can see that I dipped it down into the Nuka glaze all the way down here, and I can see that I dipped a clear glaze all the way over the Nuka because my thumbprint from where I was holding it, that's glossy. And I know the thickness of the oil spot glaze, and it's thin. So by thinning the glazes out, I used to use really thick glazes to try to get intricate colors. And by going thin, man, they're really starting to do a lot. Finger marks look nice. I like the complements of these colors. How it blushes a little bit orange by the finger marks, and this is blue. They're on opposite sides of the color wheel. And something like this, where the clay, something happened, part of the clay opened up. Those things are just gonna happen in ceramics. Like this is definitely a keeper. There's nothing flawed about this. And there's a lot of big crazing lines. You can see one right here. Definitely a keeper. Those things are why I like to do ceramics. Those imperfections that are really interesting, that are never going to change. 20 years from now, this will look identical as long as you don't drop it. Even with those cracks and like a pit of a different color. It's like, no, that's pottery. Inside's fine. The inside's very light. I wanted, because the Cosmic color palette, it's a dark inside, and I want a light inside. You know, it drips. So the inside's fine. I'm totally cool with that. But it's still a little bit dark. But the like 1, 2, 3, that's really nice. It's different up here. So the only difference I'll probably do with this is probably thin out the black glaze. The blue black glaze. Crazing from cooling too fast? I doubt it. I doubt it. This is a slow cool. Crazing is usually it's usually not from cooling quickly. You hear the crazing when you cool it quickly. It's from glaze chemistry. It's from the fit, the shrinkage. I think crazing is shrinkage. The glaze is under compression, so it crackles. And the last ceramic technician I heard talk about crazing, who was at Alfred Ceramics University, which is like prestigious. It's like Harvard for ceramics, and he was the glaze tech employed there on the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, and he said that you want crazing in your glaze. You can listen to it if you want. It's a podcast, and he said crazing is a sign of a healthy glaze. If it's no crazing, it might be under tension, and then you might get dunting, and the pottery might be a little more brittle. So you want a little bit of crazing. You want a little bit of compression. And apparently it's more durable. The pots are. But I just take a cup like this and I'll put it in a local blend and I'll see how it holds up, because it's going to be used 3 to 5 times a day, 7 days a week for months, sometimes years. And so I'll know pretty quickly whether a combination of glaze and crazing and whatever is durable or not with a real world test. What do you guys think of this? Changes color right there. Pretty intense. I have a lot of sanding and inspecting to do, because these ones will all get photographed and go right onto the internet. Take a while though. So on this shelf there are no more tests. There are just bowls and cups and mugs. This is the one that I didn't do a swirl. I put everything down vertically during the last glaze video. It's hard to tell, but the motion is a little different. It's not swirling as opposed to this one, which is swirling. This one's not. It's going straight down. Good firing. Most of these mugs are very small. I gotta make them a little bigger. If I don't use that measurement tool when I'm throwing pots, they tend to get a little too small. Yeah, this is great firing. This is a good firing. Drip, stop. That is perfect. My sizing is all over the place. I think these are ones that I made during the American Craft Council show. I think I'm finally getting through some of the last bit of that when I was like throwing for 3 days down in Minneapolis in front of people. So I was probably really, really nervous. How much do they shrink? They shrink like, they shrink like 12%, 12 to 15% from when I make them. This has some finger spots down there. By testing new colors for a new line of pots, kinda. That's kind of perfect size. It's like 16 ounce, what I usually go for. I'm kind of revisiting an older color palette. Ooh, I don't know. This one is cracked all the way through. I fired one with an S crack. It's cracked all the way through, but it's filled with glaze. So I'm going to test it. Fill it up with water, and if it has water in it and it doesn't leak out, it'll be fine forever. But if it does, gotta smash it. Do I date my pieces? No, I don't. Showing them in videos like this is kind of dating them, though. It's putting a date attached to them. But I don't worry too much about the individual piece. I think of them all as a body of work. And so I'm doing little indents on the sides right here. It's like I might be doing this all year and not do it for years. I might do them higher up or something. So that kind of dates the work too. Sharp. Why would it bubble? Because that's just something glazes do. Would I sell S-cracks half off or something? I do sell them almost half off, but only if they're still functional. I would never sell a non-functional pot. I break it because it should not exist in the world with my signature on it, when it could potentially ruin someone's like nice mahogany desk if they were gifted it and re-gifted it and re-gifted it. So no, I smash them. If they're non-functional, I smash them. I know people would want to use them to hold pens or to plant in or something, but you could wash that out and eventually someone might be able to use it. It's got my signature on it, and it could ruin something because they think it's a coffee mug because I made it a coffee mug and I failed. So no, I smash the ones that are S-cracked and that are cracked all the way through. I have to. It's just irresponsible in my opinion to put them out into the world. But this one has a tiny little S-crack, tiny little, you can barely even see it. And I saw it before and glazed over it, and it does not go all the way through, be able to see it there. Yeah, so I inspect them, and if it doesn't go all the way through, I'll test it with a little bit of water, and if it's good, then I know. If it doesn't leak right now, then it's never going to leak. Can you refire to remove bubbles? Sometimes they get bigger. There's a lot of counterintuitive things that happen in ceramics. Sweet. should do more of these. See the 2 different color palettes? Pretty cool. Might need to make a bunch more of these. These are the only 2 right now. Oh, they're really sweet though. Sorry, it's really hard when things are like mirrored. You entered the giveaway? Yeah, I'm gonna pick the winners after this video. And I've got a special surprise for tomorrow, but you'll see it tomorrow. So these plates are made to be stackable. It's actually kind of heavy though. It's probably 3 or 4 pounds. Giveaway ended. I'm gonna do another one tomorrow. Oh, ruined the surprise. There's a couple surprises actually, but I'll do a live video tomorrow. It went really well, so good luck to everybody who entered. And it was good for us too. A bunch of new people are following my Instagram and Twitter. Who knew that a potter could have a Twitter? Oh yeah, I didn't count those ones. Thank you. 3, 4. It was just 6 more. What are we at? 62 plus 6 is 68. But I'm picking out some pots for a giveaway tomorrow. Some of these pots, actually. So just tune in tomorrow if you want to enter the next giveaway. We used a new type of software, and it was awesome. It was like all these social media, all these people following me I've never met before. It's like, okay, anytime that happens, we're doing something right. So 3 people are going to win. It was $825 worth of pottery. So we're going to pick those people, ship those off, and then launch one more. $89 pots. That one's okay. Just doesn't have that like wow factor. Getting closer. Drip's really interesting. I want it lighter all over. It's pretty interesting. You can always buy stuff by looking in the title of the video. And there's a lot available. There's stuff that's sold out, or if you want a coupon, just wait for an email newsletter. Otherwise, there's probably stuff available now. Yeah, look at this blue underglaze, which is interesting because it's Oh, you know why? This is a cone 6 underglazed. I'm firing a cone 8. So if you put it on too thick, see that nasty bubbling? So I'll probably sand that down and reglaze it and refire it. It'll be darker, but maybe I'll put something over it. And this side's thinner, and it's perfect. Turned out perfect. But I was just testing colors, testing the blue and green together. But they're a lot more muted. A lot of these are tests. Inside's pretty interesting. The overlap of the blue and green is real interesting. There's a spiral in there. It's really colorful. It's hard to see when the light doesn't get in there. Yeah, it's still kind of hard to see. Yeah, that's why there's so much sanding and inspecting, because otherwise a customer could get hurt by it. Look, bleeding. There's a lot of sanding and inspecting before the pottery is ready for a customer to have a cup of coffee. I don't hate that. Definitely don't hate that. Oh yeah. There's a lot going on in there. Sorry, it looks a lot different in person. What happens to the test pieces? I keep them around and try to make them better. Try to reproduce the glazes more vibrantly. Yeah, this is a bad angle. I gotta work on that. They look best in bright sunlight if you take them outside. My left hand. So overall, this was an awesome firing. I mean, there's plenty of pots that didn't turn out, but there's a couple, just a couple that might lead to a whole new body of work. Just a couple. This one, where's the other one? Where's that other one? Oh man, I had one more. I don't know where I put it. Hold on, I'm gonna look for it real quick. This one. So these two, what I'm really thinking for like a whole new body work, lighter blue, just to bring back a lighter palette. What's going on right there? So I want something to kind of be the complement to the cosmic glaze palette. Yeah, I'll keep these up here. Well, maybe do. Yeah, maybe that. So what's interesting is to get I've been trying to get a nice green to go with the blue, these green and blues. And this green is causing some problems. See the bubbling up there? But by buying two store-bought glazes and combining them, it's getting pretty interesting. Right there and right there. It's the overlap of the blue and green. So you learn a lot of stuff through testing that might inform the new work. High fire glazes. I use some low fire glazes, but I fire everything to a high temperature, which is challenging because you're not really supposed to do that. But when it pays off, you get some really nice, gorgeous, drippy, durable pieces, because higher firing tends to be more durable for the most part. That's a big mug. I guess it's broken. Cool. All right, that's it. How many pots did I say that was? 84 pots, plus I've got at least another 30 over there to sand and inspect. Any questions before I sign off? Subscribe if you like this. Tomorrow we're doing we got another video, and it's gonna be some surprises, some cool stuff. Once I get all this cleaned up and looked at. We'll spend some time with this work, sanding and inspecting. Pretty cool. I gotta think about these tests. Plan right out the next batch of glazes, the next style of glazes. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow though. All right, thanks for watching.